Hi everyone, welcome to another weekly Forex forecast. My name is Justin Bennett with Daily Price Action, and in today's video we're going to talk about the euro versus the USD. We're going to talk about the pound versus the USD, as well as the dollar versus the yen, and we're also going to discuss the euro versus the pound, as well as the euro versus the yen. You're going to want to stay tuned because I do think the dollar yen could be setting up for a reversal this week, so let's get to it. Before we begin, be sure to hit that subscribe button below and turn on the notifications so you get notified every time I post a video just like this one today. So first up, we have the euro against the US dollar. And just like we've been looking at for the last few weeks, we still have this descending channel that's intact. And notice how the pair is also still trending between that 109.30, so 109.30 support down here, as well as that 110.70 resistance. Now, this area through here is also now a confluence of resistance based on this horizontal level, as well as this smaller descending channel. I also think we have some minor support down here just below that 110 level. So you can see where Friday's low actually retested this level, and it's also this high from that candle there. So we have several lows through here, so that 110 area could act as support for the current week, and 110.70 continues to be resistance. So I think until the euro breaks out of this sideways range right here, I think that this is a tough one to trade. While you could buy from support and sell from resistance, this isn't the type of trade that I like to take. If you're a swing trader or even a breakout trader, you're going to want to wait for a break either below 109.90 or above 110.70. If we do get a close above this 110.70, just like I mentioned last week, I do think that we could see the euro head up here to 112. Notice we have several lows back through this area, as well as highs up around that 112 mark. So I think a close above this 110.70 confluence of resistance could give us 112, whereas a close below that 109.90 area could re-expose 109.30. So these two lows through this area. And last but not least, I want to draw your attention back to the larger channel that we talked about last week. So this is one that I do think the euro still has more room to move higher than lower. And that doesn't mean that it will move higher, but I do think that just based on this price action that we've seen now for some time, if we just draw this out, draw these swings in the market, I do think that there is a greater chance for a move higher just based on this larger descending channel, that there is a greater potential for a move back up into this channel resistance than a move much lower, at least below 109.30. So while we could get a move back down here to 109.30, I do think that the downside potential is capped, in the sense that even if this 109.90 level breaks and we see 109.30, we may only get a move down here to this descending channel support. So I do think this thing has more potential to the upside if we get a break of 110.70 than a break lower for the coming week. Again, that doesn't mean it will happen. However, it is something to keep an eye on. So what do you guys think? Will the euro move higher from here or lower? Go ahead and leave your comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Next up, we have the British pound versus the US dollar. And just like we talked about last week, the pair is still caught between these two levels. So we've got 123.80 as support. Notice how it's this low, as well as these highs through here. Now, I did mention on this day on the blog, I said that if we get the daily close above 123.80, that buyers will want to come in and support the pair. And notice this low right through here. So that's exactly what I was referring to. And our target here, I've been talking about 125.70 for several weeks. If you go back and watch last week's video, I mentioned 125.70, and sure enough, that level was hit on Friday. So now that the pound has had this breakout, and it's also run for a few hundred pips, where do we go from here? So remember, we had this breakout back here on this channel, and right now, the pair has put in a decent rally through 123.80, retested 125.70. And I do think, just based on this price action through this area, this to me looks like an upward sloping flag, which does indicate that we could get a pullback into 123.80 this week. Now, as long as that area holds on a daily closing basis, so in other words, as long as the pair stays above it into the 5 p.m. Eastern close, then I do think 125.70 remains exposed. If the pair can break that, then we could see a move up here into 127.70. So notice we have several highs as well as this swing low back here. Now that's only if this 123.80 level holds as support. If we see the pound move lower this week and break 123.80, so if we get a close below this level, so anywhere through here, I do think that would be a sign of weakness for the pair. And I also think it would re-expose these highs back in this region that I talked about in the video 2 weeks ago. So really, I think that would be a sign of weakness, and we could see a pullback into this region here. However, I do think that if we break below 123.80, we could be looking at a larger retracement, perhaps back through these highs and these lows. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. As long as 123.80 stays intact as support, I think that the pound versus the US dollar stays constructive from a bullish standpoint. And if this holds, we're looking at another retest of 125.70 and perhaps a retest of 127.70 if this level breaks on a daily closing basis. Alternatively, a close below 123.80 would send the pair lower. I've mentioned the dollar yen a few times in recent weeks. The first time was when the pair was still trending below 106.80. So I talked about it right in this region, and I noted how we were getting those higher lows into 106.80. And that usually is indicative of a break higher. Sure enough, we had a close above 106.80 here and a retest as support on this candle. So once we had that, our target was this 108 level, and you can see that in recent videos. Our target was this 108 region, which is this descending channel top. Now, from here, we were looking for the pair to hold above this level. So I wrote about this on Friday. And one thing I told members is that I did not like how the pair retested the level so quickly on Thursday. However, I had to stay at least relatively bullish as long as the pair was above this level through this region. However, I wasn't buying it because A, it was Friday and I didn't want to buy before the weekend. And I also wanted to see buyers come in, step in and prop this thing up and maybe form a small bullish pin bar. But instead we got this close below this channel top, which is indicative of a false break. So right now, based on Friday's close, I have to assume that this price action through here is a false break. And I also think that 107.70 is once again resistance for the week ahead. As for key support, I think we're still looking at that 106.80 level, which again was the breakout area that I mentioned earlier. So 107.70, as long as that holds on a daily closing basis, I think the dollar yen is in trouble here and could see 106.80 in the coming week. One last thing to point out here is that if we move out to the weekly chart, you'll notice that we actually got this bearish pin bar on Friday. As I've said many times, a pin bar is nothing more than a false break on a lower time frame. So in other words, on the weekly chart, we have this bearish pin bar. However, on the daily chart that I just showed you, notice how that was a false break. So as of right now, I do think the dollar yen could head lower this week toward that 106.80 level, as long as it stays below 107.70 on a daily closing basis. Now, we could also see a pop up into this area around the 50% retracement of this bearish pin bar. But I think as long as pressure stays on the dollar yen, 106.80 is exposed with the break there, taking us all the way back here to the 105 region. So what do you all think about this price action on the dollar yen we saw last week? Do you think that the pair is going to head back higher? Or do you think this was actually a false break above the channel top and we're going to head lower toward 106.80 or perhaps even 105? Go ahead and leave your comment below. It'd be great to hear from you, and I make sure to respond to every single comment. Next up, we have the euro versus the British pound. And I talked about this one on the blog several weeks ago when the pair was trading up here, and I noted that it looked like a potential top. And I'll show you why in a moment. However, I also wanted to point out that in that post, I wrote about this 91.80 level. So notice how we had a high as well as some lows. And I said that this daily close below 91.80 meant that this level would now act as resistance. And sure enough, it did. So we were able to get short up in this area. And my target for that move was actually 89.20. So at the time, this was 89.15, and that was because of this close back here, as well as some lows and highs in the region. So sure enough, we got that retest of 89.15 back here. And since then, the pair has just sort of slid sideways right along this descending channel bottom. Okay, so for that reason, I do think that sellers have to be careful here, because anytime you start to see a market slide lower like this, okay, and especially when it's resting right at the bottom of a channel, you have to be really careful trying to short this, because as of right now, the downside is limited, whereas the upside potential, if we get a retest, a move anywhere up into this channel resistance, the upside is much greater than any downside right now. So I do think that if we see the euro against the pound close back above that 88.40 level, so notice back here we had highs and a low, so I think 88.40 is the level to watch. If we see a daily close above this area this week, then I think a retest of 89.20, that confluence of resistance, is the likely scenario. Now I will be looking for bearish price action up here if we get a move up to 89.20 this week or next. However, be aware too that if we see a close above this area right here, up above this confluence of resistance, then I do think a retest, another run at 90.15 could be in the cards. But as of right now, I still like the idea of shorting the euro versus the pound. However, I want to do that at higher levels. So if I can get short up here in this 89.20 area, I like that idea for a move back to 83.40. And if we break that, we could see a move down here into this 87.60 level. In fact, I do think that if we get a retest up here and we get another leg lower, I think that a retest of 86.80 should not be ruled out. So that's sort of my base case at the moment. And last but not least, I told you I would show you what tipped me off to this top that I mentioned through here. And for that, I have to head out to the weekly time frame. And you'll notice that we had a bearish engulfing week that I wrote about on the blog. So this week right here was a bearish engulfing week. And what's notable about this is that the euro had actually put in 14 consecutive weeks of gains. So notice all of these positive candles that formed over the course of 14 straight weeks. So there was a lot of buyers trapped in this uptrend. So as soon as we got this reversal, notice how this thing unwound just as fast as it went up. And furthermore, we also had a level of resistance up in this region. So notice that we had this huge upper wick through here, as well as this high, and then that top formed right at the same level. So that tipped me off to the fact that this was a top. And as of right now, again, I think as long as this descending channel stays intact, I do favor selling the pair. But again, I want to sell at higher levels so I can get a favorable risk to reward ratio. I talked about the euro yen in last week's video, and nothing really changed here last week, because although in last week's video I said that a break higher was possible, I also noted that we weren't seeing that type of compressed price action within this channel. And sure enough, that 119.70.80 area held as resistance. So I also talked about this during the week. I released a video, and I did say that the euro yen looked as though it may want to break this level. However, my trigger for a move higher up into 121 was a daily close above this channel top. And notice if I zoom in, you'll note that the pair never did close above it. So we got this spike higher as well as some upper wicks through this region, but we never actually got a close above this resistance level. And I also said last week that as long as this resistance level holds, that sellers are in control and I don't want to buy this. And sure enough, on Friday, we saw a sell-off that followed the dollar yen. Now, as for support for the week ahead, I do think that 118.30 could offer some support. So notice that we have several highs through this region, as well as a high here and some lows right through here. So 118.30 is what I'm watching, as well as 117.80. So notice that this is the location of several highs, or I'm sorry, several lows and several highs through here. So one other thing about 117.80 is that it is the 50% retracement of this short-term range. So notice how that 50% comes in just above 117.80. So here's the 50%, here's 117.80. So if we do see a move below 118.30, I think that 117.80 is one to keep an eye on. That said, I'm not looking to buy the euro yen right now. I think that as long as this trend is intact, in other words, as long as this channel stays intact, I think that the euro yen could move lower, and I'm not interested in buying this. Instead, I would rather look to short it perhaps up here on these lows. Or if we get a close below this region, then we could see a run at that 116 handle all the way down here. So I would rather look for shorts as long as this trend is intact. On the flip side, just like I mentioned last week, if we do see a close above that channel top, that would be a sign of strength, and it would also expose that 121 region and perhaps even 123.40. But for now, as long as this level is intact as resistance, I do think that we could see a lower euro versus the yen. That wraps up another weekly Forex forecast. Before I sign off, be sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you enjoyed the content. Last but not least, leave your comment below and let me know what you think.